has a lot of movement and energy to a very traditional design, such as curved crosshatch. Now, based on the size of your block or space that you're doing it in, you might choose to make your Hello my friends, and welcome to the Quilter's Apothecary. Today I am excited for a few things. We're going to go through a tutorial on how to create a couple amazing block designs as well as a border base design using our new ruler, the Wave 13. Now when I say our, what I'm referring to is Sue Hines and myself, Jamie Wallen. We have created this wonderful series of rulers, and this is the one that we're introducing first because we find that this is one that's going to be used a lot, almost as much as potentially a ditch ruler. So once you start seeing what the possibilities are, I think you two are going to be just as excited as we are. All right, so let's take you down to the table and show you the ruler. So here is that beautiful new ruler, and I am so excited about this. I have done some other things to kind of do similar type of designs that I'm going to be doing with this particular ruler. When Sue and I designed it, we spent a lot of time. We came up with a few different copies, we changed it, we improved it, and this is the first in our series of the Wave rulers. And this is of course called the Wave 13. And obviously because the ruler is 13 inches. Now typically what I have found is I find that this works perfect in a max size blocks of about 9.5 to 10 inches. And that's kind of my experience with this wonderful new ruler. Now, with this new ruler, the marks on it that we have are, I think, perfect for this. And the shape itself leads to some wonderful design choices. We have a mimicked wave here and one that also is here that matches that, up and down. And of course, you can take this and turn it any way you want so that way you're in and out. The height of your curve can be either ways. That's one of the things that I love about this new rulers. And of course, this is the In Cahoots is the name of it, the Wave 13. Now, the other thing that we did is we didn't want dead space on the end. We didn't want flat space. We wanted something that we could actually utilize for some decorative corners when we're doing some border treatments, or even some other things that we have in the works with this particular ruler. But I am jumping ahead. Let's first do a few basic things with this particular ruler so that you can kind of be introduced to it, and then we'll move on to a little bit more fancy designs. Now we're going to cover a few blocks, and we're going to cover a base for a border, and then in part 2 of this particular drawing form of this, then we'll go over some more. So today we're going to be drawing out the designs. Now down the road we also have an accompanying ruler that will be, if you want to pre-mark something, it'll actually be the marks if you want to pre-mark before you actually quilt it. Because remember, once you add a 1/4 inch, the curve is going to change a little bit from drawing to actually quilting out because of your 1/4 inch foot. So down the road we will have an accompanying drawing assistance ruler if you want to pre-mark something. But right now we're going to start with this, and I think you're going to love it. Alright, so let's go into some design. Here we have a block. So the first thing I'm going to do with my block is I've located the center vertically and horizontally. I'm going to go ahead, mark Mark a line. Now this is something that's fairly simple to use this ruler for, but boy, talk about an impact. It's a fresh way to use the ruler. It adds a lot of movement and energy to a very traditional design, such as curved crosshatch. Okay, so now we have our marks through the middle. And again, you don't always have to do the middle, but I tend to like to use the middle. So now we have our ruler. And remember, one thing I didn't mention before, this ruler has a wonderful low-level handle. So that means it's a wonderful leverage handle. So that way it's not going to slip. It's going to be easier to hold. Even though at times you may want to put a little bit of something on the bottom, especially for our sit-down quilters. That way it's not going to slide or move, but the handle is going to help a lot, and it's not too tall. It's kind of the perfect height. We did a lot of auditioning with different heights, and this is the one that we came up with, and it's perfect. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to slide over, and again, just like anything, this is the center of our ruler. So when we are doing curved crosshatch, we always want to go to the center and utilize our vertical and horizontal stage lines. And that's going to take us evenly across. So now, if I were doing this with my machine, I would have come back a quarter of the way for the measurement that I'm going to use now. But because right now I'm simply drawing, to give you an example of one of the designs that this ruler does, I'm going to go back 3 notches. I went ahead and put our red tape here to make it easier just to slide across and hit my spot every time, as you will see. So let us begin. I'm going to start here. I'm going to make sure that my center line is lined up here. And then very simply lock my stitches. Remember, I would have ditched around my block and possibly put in an echo because I like that negative space. I think it adds a lot. So I'm going to start here. We're going to go down, stop. I would travel the ditch, slide the ruler, and what I'm going to do is my tape goes to the hill here. Now let me say this, I'm using the hill in the middle. If you choose to, you could have started this by flipping the ruler around the other way and starting with the valley in the middle. And we're going to talk a little bit more about different designs in another tutorial of how you can actually make these wonderful twining ropes designs that are great in blocks. But again, I'm moving forward. I am so excited because there's tons of things we can do with this. So back to point here, line that up. And again, I want to make sure, just like when we do curve crosshatch, that my center line is exactly lined up where it needs to be. And also, because I have the extra hills, I can also look to make sure that that's lined up. Go ahead, do another line, and what I'm going to do is work my way all the way across, lining that up. And again, I can check my hills, tip of the hills. The tape goes to the tip of the hills. Come across, and I would work my way straight across. Line it up. I love the feel of it, the dip. When I've quilted with this, it's a fun ruler, and it's so fresh. You know, I am, again, typically, I've been an 8 to 12 hour a day quilter, and so you get tired of the same old. It's nice to have some fresh visuals in your quilting, and this, I think, is a wonderful fresh way to show some really cool design work and options in your quilting. Though I don't compete with other long arm quilters, I will say it is wonderful to be able to bring something new to the table in your area. So I'm going to work my way all the way across. And again, remember, as with curves, when we're doing curve crosshatch, when we're doing the wave crosshatch, we want to make sure that we don't only line up here, but we also are lining up back there. Otherwise, we don't want this to lean one way or the other. We want to keep it nice and straight. Now I'm there. I'm going to just do one more little test. I'm there. That would go on the outside of the block, so that one we don't need to do. We're done there. So now, just like with our regular curved crosshatch, we come down to the bottom and we head our way up. Or, the one thing to remember as well, if you had 4 cornerstones on a quilt, and you want the middle up to go out on the right side and then up on the right side, and then on the left cornerstone block, if you want this middle arc to go that way, then you would simply turn the ruler around this way to get the opposite effect, which is, again, such a wonderful way to use this and not make it awkward to hold as your wave curves different ways throughout the quilt. And again, when we start doing some of our other border treatments, I actually have so far about 40 great different designs to utilize this for borders and blocks, and I've only scratched the surface. And I know you're going to be coming up with some really incredible ways to use this. Got to have tools for a toolbox. Especially those of us that quilt for a trade. We always want to keep it fresh. Now before, what I would do is I would use a curve to get this same effect, and it would take 5 times as long to complete the block or the border. And I love how this just makes it simple. And as we come out with the rest of the series, as it continues, you're going to see that there are a ton of different things that this series of rulers is going to bring to the long arm or surface quilting table. And again, this ruler is not just for frame quilters, long arm quilters, it's also for our sit down folks. Sue was very specific about wanting to make sure, because she does mostly the sit down quilting, that this would be good to use on her sit down machine. And so that was something that we took into account. So what we have now, let's move that away, we have this wonderful, modern, and fresh look at curved crosshatch. Now the one thing that I'm excited about is, even though this stands alone on its own for some inside blocks, or remember, it doesn't always have to be in a square, it could be in circles, it could be inside of hearts, it could be inside absolutely any shape, diamonds, hexagons, anything, you can use this. Now, not only is it awesome in something like this, but also the one thing that we want to remember is we could also, instead of having our lines go vertical and horizontal, we could have done an X, and we could actually do a 45-degree crosshatch with this particular design. Now, the next thing I would say is this. I love, of course, to add a little bit of magic to this, and I want to go ahead and at times do my checkerboarding. And of course, checkerboarding on specialty quilts, show quilts, something that I really want to be real showy with, is simply when I diagonally take every other row. Here I skip this one, 1, 2, 3, skip this one, 1, 2, 3. I go ahead and use my chalk once I've quilted this out, and I always pre-mark so that way when I go to quilt, I'm not going to end up with an oops. So there, what I've done is I've pre-marked so that when I go in here, lock my stitches, and I want to do some micro quilting now. I'm just going to do some slop work here, just so you can get the idea. Travel my ditch up, come back down, do some filler work, fill that in, travel diagonally so that I don't have to keep cutting thread as I maneuver through, get through that, fill that in, travel diagonally, come down, travel the ditch, head up. What I'm going to end up with is this wonderful checkerboarding where every other square is filled with your wonderful micro work. And boy, you want to talk about having that show be an amazing effect, especially for this design. It just is extremely fresh to the eye, and it's very decorative. And it just makes your quilt, takes your quilting to a whole different level. So now what I'd like to do is I want to take a little time and go through a few other ways that we can use this ruler in blocks before we move into a border base. So for our next block, I've made the same registration marks right through the center, across vertically, horizontally. I'm going to slide, I'm going to go not quite as deep. I'm going to go one notch less. So I'm going to go there, line that up. One. Two. Three. 4. Now, based on the size of your block or space that you're doing it in, you might choose to make your lines closer together or further apart. That's kind of the whole creative process. That's why you would draw up a bunch of different squares like this and build your portfolio of drawing with that. Now, I did 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to repeat that on all 4 sides. Go up. Now the thing to remember is the middle here, the line is the curve in, so I don't accidentally want to go this way and flip my ruler. So the tape is a nice reminder of which side I go in on. One. Two. What I love about this is because of the height, there are so many ways to double check and make sure that you're lining everything up perfectly. 3, 4, and I know that a lot of you have been with me a long time, so you know I love framework. I love working with frames. So now the next thing that you would do if you were at your long arm is you would go ahead and you could then go this way. Now I am right-handed, so instead what I would do is I would take my ruler and I would go ahead and I would take it here. That way I still have the divot in, and I would utilize that. I would mark my mark here, which is approximately a half of an inch, and I would mark that here, and that is where I would want to make sure that my hopping foot hit for my first mark, if that makes sense. And then I would mark specifically, and when we take this design to the long arm and one of the next parts after we build a few designs, then I will show you in a future episode how I would actually quilt that. Okay, but right now, let's keep it simple. Let's line that up. In fact, for the drawing, let me turn the paper. And this is something, and I know you've heard me say it hundreds of times, but this is why you want to have some poster board, copy paper near your TV in the evening, a couple of the rulers that you want to play with, and simply explore with different blocks and build your portfolio. Portfolio is so important. Line that up. Again, we'll repeat what we just did. Reminds me of the last part of a roller coaster ride at Disneyland where it goes up and down and up and down. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we've got 4 there, and so you're starting to see the wonderful framework that you can get. Line that up. And again, not only here, but I can also check where my tape is on the top of the hill. One more. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so now we have this wonderful frame that looks incredible. Absolutely incredible. And we could put a wonderful medallion on the inside. I mean, the options are myriad once we've created something like this.
Photo block?
Photo block. You could actually have framed a photo block inside of a block. That's actually a quilt that I'm piecing right now for myself. A family quilt. So now, the other thing that I want to say is, if we wanted to instead not put a medallion in here, we could actually do some really cool things. Mix and match a little bit. And again, right now we're still working on just some basics for this particular design video. But look at this option here. Do you see how what I've done is not only do I have my cross, but I've also made my X, and now I would be working in from the middle and heading up on all 4 sides. So here we've got in, or again, if I were at the machine, it would actually be starting there on this side of the ruler, so that way it's not awkward for me to hold. And then same thing here, or I could head here. Again, that's where you measure and you get your points in place, and I will show you that when we actually quilt this out in a future episode. And then same thing, go up here. So we could put this inside here, and all we would need to do at this point is to line this up, get our registration marks just inside there. I didn't have to start with my X. Okay. So there we go. Now we have that. And now again, we can go ahead and we can go inside here and start following that line. Now, the reason that I don't do my X first, if I'm going to do this frame, is because then this line, if we did it ahead of time, would be set in stone. And if you're just off a little bit, like I can tell here, when I put my ruler down, and this is part of freehand, I'm just off a little from the corner. The eye is not going to catch that as long as you go ahead and make your mark inside your space. So this is part 2 of this block in here. We always complete part 1 and then we go to part 2 from point to point, not tip to tip, unless we were doing just this basic on point. Okay, so since we're inside of another shape, you always want to make sure that you have your guidelines inside the shape. Okay, so now next thing, we're going to start here. We're going to start building that out. 1, 2. Again, we're keeping our center line right on that spoke of the X from the center out. Okay, so now that might be as far as I want to go. If I did another one, what would happen, of course, is I would extend past this next part. I want to wait. If I want to build that in on the inside, then I would wait. So I only want to go to just before I get to where the cross hits on this spot. And then I would repeat that. Line it up. Make sure you get your line nice and straight. Line it up, make sure everything's lined up back there. And we also want to remember, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Match the numbers. This actually doesn't come as close to this as this does. But our cross is chalk. It's a pre-mark. It's going to go away. The eye is not going to see that it's just a hair off. Again, line up here and back here. Make sure that we're on that line. I'm at an odd angle while I'm drawing this, so I'm not lined up perfect, but when I'm over it on the long arm machine or the sit down machine, it's a little easier to get it perfect. Or if the camera wasn't right above my head, it would be right on top of it. Okay, so there that section is. Now again, you have a spot here. You have the opportunity to do some different things here. You could go out from the center and do some mystical grid work in from the or out from the center and in on all of the spokes around here. The other thing that you could do at this point is now you could actually take your ruler, line it up, and what you could actually do is continue with your infinity wave diamond all the way. So you go to this line, stop, shift your ruler, line it up, and again you're lining up this line. Whoops, let me get to the line there. This line here on that line here, and then you simply slide up to where your hopping foot is needle down, and then you would simply go over to that line, and then very simply you would repeat the same thing, line that up, get my center line, and then you would continue all the way around. Now the nice thing about this is on this particular ruler what we have is we have a 45-degree angle, so it would be pretty easy to just line that up and continue all the way around to build up that infinity, whatever your measurement is, all the way into the center, and you'd end up with this wonderful dimensional piece. Now remember, you also then have the option of going up. This is making me crazy here visually. Let me take this, line that up. Come on, get in there. Okay, line up. Get that as straight as I can on top of it. And remember, we always want to air to what this is when it touches here. So we come over here, line that up, turn the ruler. You would continue on, so we line up this, always that line, but the one time we would shift it is to make it match this line, because visually the eye will automatically self-correct. So we want to then continue making those echoes in. Now we could again switch, so we could go back to, just for grins and giggles, we can go back to our vertical and horizontal. And that's going to give us a wonderful modern op art type of effect. Go up here and we can keep doing that. Now at this point where we would stop would be at this line, or we could take it all the way up like this, like that, until we almost reach the center, as close as we can get to the center without crossing that center line. And then if we did it here as well, so in other words on all four sides, and knowing that I would be doing this, what I would do is the lines that I would do bold quilting 1, 2, 3, and or even change color is anywhere where I'm switching directions. So this last line before I switch to this, and then this last line before I switch to this. Okay. And what we also have created is another option for some checkerboarding throughout the design. Okay, turn my paper for the sake curve. And yes, you just saw me grab the wrong ruler. That's happened on the long arm. Sometimes I'll have 10 rulers sitting on the long arm and I accidentally go for the wrong ruler. It happens. Gotta stay frosty with this. The other thing that I love about this particular design is the secondary Planter's Peanut Man there. You kind of get just accidentally. I always love a double curve. We get that a lot in our mystical grid work. And again, I'm only taking this up to the horizontal center. Am I getting close? Yes. So, yep, I get one more. Okay, let me line that up. Obviously, I don't have that lined up exact. But remember, we also want to remember this cross and the X is going to be wiped away. Now, again, you have options here if we were actually going to go in here and do some checkerboarding. Skip this one, do these three, skip that one, and then do those little tips. And you would do that on all three of these sections, and you'd end up with this amazing checkerboard dimensional design. So again, this is another simple but really striking way to use this incredible new ruler. And again, if you wanted to stay a little bit more basic, then you would do something like this. All right, now there are a ton of ways we can use this in blocks, but what I want to do with this introduction is let's take it now into a border. Okay, so now we're going to move into a base for borders, and this base is going to lead to many different borders. We're going to close with building this base, and then on the next part we're going to go into a bunch of amazing ways to use this base for, I would probably say, some of my favorite border treatments I've ever come up with. All right, let's head down to the paper. All right, so now what I've done, as an example, just to kind of show you, and this will work in any size. Of course, you will adjust it a little bit, but we're going to work with a 5-inch border going around here. And what I've done is we've got a 5-inch border. I've located the center here, here. And by the way, I didn't just locate the center here and assume it was the same. I always want to, if it's going to be in an actual quilt, I would fold it in half each side, locate the center so that I know exactly where that center is. Because with some of our piecers, this side might be an inch or two longer, and if you mark this center the same place you mark this center, it could be off. So I'm always going to find the different center from each edge of my border. Okay, so now let me reach over here. I've already located that line, got that center, gonna line it up, give myself my registration mark, and again, this is just simply with chalk. And then again, as you've seen on this side, I've mitered these two sides. So that means we're going to go over here, we're going to miter all 4 of these. Again, right now I'm just making my registration marks. Registration mark. And this guy's a little bit off. I want it better. Better, better, better. Yes, if I were on a quilt, I would erase and redo it. It's chalk, it will wipe away. Okay, there we go. Good. Okay, so now the next thing I'm going to do, and you can see that I've already done it here, is I'm going to divide this border in half. So it's a 5-inch wide border, and then I went in 2.5 inches and gave myself a registration line. So 2.5. Two and a half. And, okay, this is important. Right here, I did the 2.5, but it's not meeting with this. I always want it to meet and make it work. I am more concerned about making it work than that the quilt is perfectly square. I want to visually make sure that it looks perfect, even if the quilt is not perfect. So now I'm going to go to there. So here, I'll take it to the line, which is just a smidge, and I mean a smidge, scant over 2.5. And then I'm going to go ahead up there and make sure that I'm at 2.5 up here. Visually, nobody will know that it's a scant off, but it will meet perfect there, and that is important to me. Now, because I'm on paper, I'll go ahead, turn this. Two and a half, 2.5. Yep. And that happened to end up perfect. Okay, so there we go. So now we have the base for our measurements. Now, to do the base for an amazing border treatment, the next thing we're going to do is, wipe some of this off, is we're going to go ahead, we're going to grab our wave ruler, and if you were quilting, then what I would do is this. Give me just a second. Let me set you up to show you something. What I want to show you is for the continuum, no matter how big the border is, the one thing that I want you to remember is right here, this first line that takes you to the end curve is going to be where you always meet. So in other words, this is going to be from here all the way in to here, a constant repeat. Once you get past this line this way and past this line this way, it's no longer consistent with the edge here. So this is the repeat from here to here. And of course, that's something you want to keep in mind. And again, if you're dealing with an in on the bottom, it's a low, it's the valley. On the top, it's the top of the hill right here. So that's something we want to keep in mind, okay? And that will help you a little bit as you figure out and play with your border treatments. All right, so now let's go back to our border. Widen out a little bit. Let's get rid of some of this visual shrapnel here. Let's zoom in just a little bit more. Okay. Now what I want us to focus on first is, let's take a look at this bottom border. So I'm going to bring this up, zoom us in a little bit more, and as we focus on that, I want to show you how I'm going to build that. Now, when I first started playing with these particular types of borders by just using curves and such, the 45-degree is what makes it work well for me. Okay, so now one of the things that I want to do here is I want to take this to the top. Now here, once I'm here, what you see is I'm in the valley in the corner. And what I actually want to do is to be at the top peak. I like a peak at the top or at the corner of my border. So I want to flip my ruler around instead. And I want to look at this and see that what I actually want is the top peak. This line that we talked about, where the repeat goes, is going to go right here to the edge. Now the one thing that we want to do is to decide how wide we want our double echo. Let me take a second. Let me bring in an example just to show you. So what I want you to see here is in this corner it comes up rather than in. So that's what I want to do. And so what I'm sharing with you is this. So when I did this, this corner right here, the curve heads up and out to this right here. And I'm always going to be working from the corner into the center. And it will end where it ends in the center. And what that means, and that's why you want to be real careful about locating your center, is that when I go over here, I start with the high point. And when I head into the center, it's going to meet, if you've done your locate the center right, in the exact same spot. And that's going to give you this wonderful base frame. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so now the one thing that I want to do as I look at this, I'm going to bring this over, is I make the decision how wide I actually want my my border. And so what I've chose here is I want a 1/2 inch ribbon as I work my way through this. And so I look there and I realize that in order to get a 1/2 inch ribbon, what that means is I want to put my tape on that second line. If you don't want the tape, then if you don't need the tape, you don't need the tape. I find myself that I need to have that tape just as a visual cue where to put my line. So I'm going to flip this over. I'm going to grab my tape. And this is our special ruler tape that we have. And I go in 2 marks and make sure that all the way across I put that right on the mark. Rip that, and now I don't even have to think about it. I know that I want to go right to the tape. And let's line it up there. And then here where we have our lines. Sue and I took a long time to figure out exactly where we wanted our registration line so that we could use for future things that we haven't come up with. So now I've got that, and now I know that that's going to work. So now let's head back and let me show you how I mark this out. Okay. So now, remember what I said. Here is the line. Let me come over a little bit. This would be more helpful. Let's zoom you in. Obviously, we have our miter and our center. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this. I want this line where the tape is, because that's how wide I've decided that particular ribbon's going to be, to go right to that center line. But I'm going to slide. This is where the continuum ends. I want this to be right here on the miter. So I simply take it, slide it over to the miter, and now we line that up over here to make sure our line is going straight across. Our line starts right here. That's going to be the upper part of the hill. We go this way. We stop here. That's where the continuum ends. We're not to the center yet, but if we do this, we're not going to make it to the center. So we go right here. Now we slide this one over and we line it up right here. We line up our tape back on that mark that we marked as the center, and obviously line this up, make sure that that's good. Remember, if you were quilting this, you would have needle down here. And then once you're right there, now you go right to the center. So now you're good to go there. Next thing you're going to do is you're going to use the opposite side of your ruler. You're going to come back. You're going to line that back up so that your continuum line goes exactly back where it was, but you're half of an inch in. That's why we have these dotted lines for your sew line. You're going to line that up. I'm going to go right here. Stop on the continuum line. Slide that over. Line it up. And I just need to slide it one hill over, because I can see we're already going to hit the center, so we're in place, and I want to make sure that my dotted line is lined up on the sew line. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so that's lined up. Next thing we want to do is we want to head the opposite way. So now we come back to this corner. We always work from the edge into the center for this particular base. So I go here, line that up. Get you back in frame there. Okay, so my continuum line right here goes all the way there. My tape goes down to where I measured halfway. I'm at the top of the hill, over, stop at that continuum, slide one hill over, line it up. Now, again, we always say, make it work based on what you've sewn. So line that up, and if I line that up, I'm not going to hit exactly where I've sewn. So I'm actually going to keep it here, right on the tape, but I'm going to tilt this to match, and have remember, your hopping foot here is already in place. Your needle's down. So you're going to slide down, and this is where, if you need to do a little shift with the ruler, you line it up to make it match perfectly. So now you have both sides going in and meeting exactly where they need to meet. Now we'll repeat what we did before. Go to our continuum there. That perfectly echoes what we already have. Line that up. Sorry. Line that up. Hitting the edge of my paper there. Okay, I check out my dotted line. Up. Hit there. Slide over. Line it up. And again, same thing. So if it doesn't hit exact here, then what we want to do, we make it work. And that is simply human error there. So I gotta line that up. Okay, good to go. My needle is locked down, and so now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to meet there. So now everything meets. I now would go ahead and I would do the same thing from the corner down. Let's say you were working down a quilt. What we would have actually done is you would have done across the top, same thing, working from the corner in. And at this point, when you're working down the side, you can either base this and turn the quilt if you choose, Or you could complete the whole quilt, base this, and then come back and just go up and down to complete. That's up to you. If you like to turn quilts, you can turn quilts. But one thing that I will do is the top half, I can actually go ahead and do the side coming down. Again, it would be the same thing. We want to make sure top of our hill meets there, the measurement stays right on our half line, and we would work our way down to the center on both sides, making that ribbon. And what happens, of course, is we have this. We have this wonderful base here, ribbon base, that now we can do a ton of different things that I got to tell you, I've come up with about 30 different things, and they're incredible, every single one of them. So on our next tutorial, we're going to go over what are some of the things that we can use this wonderful frame for, and ways that we can use it with our quilting to make things a lot more interesting. All of that, of course, is with this wonderful Wave 13, which I think you're going to love. So there we go. There is our initial tutorial for that. And I know a lot of you have been writing in, say, how do I use this? I just purchased this. What do I do with it? Well, there are a few ways to do it, and you're going to see some more coming up. All right, everybody. As always, thank you so much for joining us here in our studio. Thank you for taking your time. Your time is valuable, and we always like to give you a lot of meat with your potatoes. And as always, take care of yourself, take care of each other. We'll see you all down the road. Goodbye, everybody.